when did you start getting into Italian films? Did you grow up with them at home?
Well, my father was very cognizant of Italian cinema for sure, even before I was. My father being a second generation Italian from Brooklyn and Queens. But then my initial experience with seeing Italian cinema was actually on Italian television in Italy, which was probably the first. I know was the first time I saw 8½. But television, particularly before the advent of streaming and whatnot, television was to one extent or another sort of noise coming out of an appliance in your living room. So that definitely was my first experience with a movie, but not the experience that would make its largest impression on me of that movie in particular, and Italian cinema in particular.
So did you take an instant liking to it, or did it gradually grow to really dive into the history of Italian film?
You mean Italian cinema in general, or 8½?
Yeah, just pretty much in general. Like, did you instantly take to it, or was it when you were a little older that you started to really want to explore it?
Italian cinema in general was sort of part and parcel with a lot of my relationship with Italian culture, being an Italian from New York, but who like a lot of us had sort of one foot in Italian culture, one foot in American culture. So I'm hearing stories from my parents. I'm hearing them talk, even not in a way that is proselytizing anything, but just talking about their culture. And these figures in Italian cinema, like Fellini, like Mastroanni, for instance, were just part of that vocabulary. So being in a culture that is Anglo-normative and not Italian or Latin normative, hearing these names, that that's something different that is part of your DNA than what is the quotidian life. And I'm sure a lot of cultures in North America, certainly in the US, and I'm sure also Canada, can relate to that. So then being in Italy, actually diving into it and seeing, wow, there are a lot of people here who kind of look like me, who have a name that is a lot like mine. No one is making fun of the fact that I have a name like Crisafulli or Bellissimo, for instance, really resonates. So the culture at large definitely was eye-opening and something that grew on me as an immediate impression the more time I spent there. But cinema, particularly, and my awakening to everything that Italian cinema had to offer, actually specifically came by way of 8½. And that happened all at once for me when I was in college. And I took 2 cinema classes in college. One was, I think, Cinema, Society, and Culture. And the other one was basically a language of cinema class, an intro to cinema that basically introduced us to the language and the recognition of cinema and cinematic attributes. And our instructor showed one scene from 8½. And that one scene changed my life.
Do you remember which scene it was?
Yes, all it was a scene when he's at like the spa, the health spa, and it was just one shot, which I believe was a pan. And within that one unbroken pan, all the blocking that Fellini did with the characters arriving, I think, at the end on the main character. We all today talk about Scorsese's Copacabana shot or P.T. Anderson's opening shot to Boogie Nights. Awesome shots that totally call attention to themselves, that every filmmaker, whether you're Spike Lee or maybe us, tried to emulate, basically with a Steadicam. And instead, this is a one long unbroken take in one simple move where the camera operator doesn't move his or her feet, but the blocking tells an entire story, making sort of a wonderful short film within one shot. And so when I saw that shot, just, and all of a sudden, all the times I was watching Italian television, bored or socializing with family or friends, where maybe it was noise in the background, um, came back to me. I really had a Paul falling off his horse come to cinema moment. And then I rented it. I took it out of my college's library, the movie, and I sat in my dorm and I watched the whole thing through. And it was one of the 3 movies that changed my life.
Wow, I love that's such an incredible story, and it's so true. I mean, every time you think of those great POV shots, I mean, I'm sure Joe. I mean, it's not like it was a new shot. I mean, Hitchcock was known to use POV all the time, and many other directors. But in this case, I don't know of anyone else who used it literally talking to the characters, as you said, blocking. Everyone's coming at Mastroianni as Guido. Everyone wants something from him. Everyone's looking for answers. And yeah, you can't help but think of Boogie Nights. You can't help but think of Goodfellas. They all, so many, Spike Lee, so many filmmakers have done that, and even perhaps something as recent as Birdman, to an extent, has a feeling of just coming at you.
The entire movie.
Yeah, the entire film, which is so incredible. So what do you think though? Where because so many people talk about what we're talking about in terms of how Fellini shot the film, the which I love, of course, which I admire. But where do you think the heart of the film really lies? What's the essence of the story, do you think?
In my opinion, the essence of the story, and I think actually the bulk of Fellini's body of work lies in Fellini's own psychology as a man in relationship to women and his society, and the ways that I think Fellini feels he did not succeed in overcoming his own issues as a man, as a husband. And I think you were talking about 8.5, which is a masterpiece, one of the most influential motion pictures ever. But I think Fellini kind of stretched that issue as far as it possibly could be stretched the further he went into his career. And we sometimes talk about someone like Woody Allen just on a hamster wheel in terms of subject matter. And I think it's not unfair to say that in the next decade, 2 decades of his career, Fellini might have been as well. But in 8.5, it's so succinctly, I think, expressed, especially it's pretty, I think, obvious and on the nose in the last scene where he has this voiceover where he's speaking, I think, directly to his wife, where you've seen an entire motion picture of flashbacks of his women issues, whether it's with his mother, whether it's with his sisters, whether it's with the local prostitute on the beach. He's from like a beach town who all the boys finally got enough change together just to have her dance for them. They're never going to be able to touch or have a relationship with a woman yet. But finally, it culminates at the end where he's talking to his wife saying, I wish I could look into your eyes as a faithful man, as a husband you deserve. I think he may even say as a Catholic, as an authentic Christian or something. But to me, it's on the nose that Fellini, and therefore Guido, in the movie is wrestling with this. And particularly in that movie, it's how can he manifest these struggles within himself on the canvas that he has to work with as an artist, which is cinema. He even has a line where he's struggling to figure out as a director what his next movie is going to be. And he says, I don't have anything to say, but I want to say it all the same. So he's really struggling to find a language to express his angst or his issues or his expression as a man.
Very well said. Very well said. And, it's a film that, for me, it's probably my favorite Italian film as well of all time. But between that and Bicycle Thieves, it's a tough call for me. But every time I see it, there's always so much to discover in this film, particularly, I think when I watched it again last year, how much it really hit me about a man who doesn't really know how to love, you know, and I love that he doesn't necessarily tell you how. He gives you why. For me, he gives you those suggestions, particularly the dream sequence where he's talking to his parents early on. And he says to his father, you know, we've talked so little. And his father changes the subject or says he doesn't want to talk about it. So I took that as distance. He had distant people growing up, and perhaps that really just led him to not be loved the way he needed to be loved by perhaps his parents. And then, you know, he's also such a flawed character. He's cheating on his wife. Even he's not even very good to his mistress. You know, the woman, he's using her for what I took from it. He's sexually attracted to her, but he has nothing to say to her. You know, when he meets her in the train station, when they're going out to eat, he's reading the newspaper. You know, he lies to his wife. He's cheating on her. I mean, he's a flawed guy, but at the same time, you feel for him. You see his struggle. And Claudia Cardinale tells him straight up later on, you know, you don't know how to love anyone. And another thing I just really discovered that all those little dancing he does every now and then, even down the hallway, and he's sort of dancing, or you know, when everyone's coming at him, he jumps up in the air and sings a little song or a little chant. And I really took that as he's always just trying to get out of the way he's feeling. So if he's trying to dance it off or you know, laugh it off or what have you, but it lends so much to the humor of the film. And I'm sure you know, Joe, you know, Fellini on the camera had a little note that said, remember, this is a comedy, you know. And it's true. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a whole comedy, but it certainly has a lot of really, I don't think we think about this film as comedy, but even when he's picking out those men, the old men with the assistant director and asking everyone's age and saying that they're not old enough, and the other guy, look at this guy, he's about to drop dead. you can't help but laugh. You know, there's so many moments like that, and just the surrealism of it all. I mean, did you have any experiences like that? Did anything I'm saying kind of resonate with your experience?
Oh, with the film, not my life.
Or both.
No. Yeah, you know, it's great that you point out how he reminded people of the comedy and the humor. You know, it shows that he's being self-critical, but he's definitely doing it from a place of good faith. He can laugh at himself, and I think he had a quality of looking at himself in a way that was pathetic, but not necessarily tragic. You know, for instance, the scene with his mistress where he's literally putting makeup almost as a clown on her to do some type of role play, and she's going along with it because, you know, I guess that's adventurous. You do whatever you do, you know, you want to do with your partner, but it kind of accentuates a sort of infantile, pathetic nature that he just can't get beyond what his issues were. And frankly, you know, I think that in a lot of our society, a lot of issues come from people's inability to be square with their natural selves. And I don't mean people that are derelicts or are real menaces to society, you know, in terms of the nature of being a predator or something, but so many people kind of aren't square with sexual politics, and men in particular who have this driving natural force, and so many of us and society at large can't come to a positive sense of terms with that. And I think that's really what Fellini's talking about. You know, you see children on the beach trying to get change together to watch a woman doing nothing perverted. I mean, she's fully clothed, she's doing, you may as well be paying to see the local carnival show, but to see a woman. But the sad thing is, which I think Fellini finds humorous and self-deprecating, is that as a grown man, he, you know, it's one thing if you're a child and you shouldn't have just access to whatever the hell, you know, whatever your indulgences are. But as a man, he can't come to terms with his truest self and his own
Right.
self-exploration and his relationships. And I think that's a good quality of Fellini. I would have liked to have seen later on in his career him kind of actually mature as well. But these are all things that in 8.5, and even to an extent, certainly La Dolce Vita, that I think he explores in a really wonderful way. And you mentioned his father, you know, his father, um, that's also resonant in La Dolce Vita when his father just shows up and he takes him out on a night in the town and they're watching a cabaret show, and he's literally sitting there, Marcello, looking at his dad, wishing that they had more to talk about.
Mm,
You know, and
that's right.
yeah, you know, with you know, I'm not an expert on Fellini's biography, but I think it's fair to say that um, there's biographical issues there, and in that movie, his father goes home with one of the women in Marcello's. I mean, I don't want to say side piece. You know, he's a single guy on Via Veneto, living large, but the father goes home with one of the women, and Marcello knows that obviously he's cheating on our mom, and the dad can't go through with it, and the dad has a health issue, and it kind of goes back to sort of this inherent impotence that has to do with the man's psychology, you know. So I think Fellini Incarnate addresses a lot of these sensual psychological issues inherent with a lot of people, certainly with men.
I never, you know, it's a really good point. I never actually thought about that role play he has with the mistress. So are you saying that you took that as he can't just, everything has to be sort of some kind of a show with him. He can't just be himself with another woman, even when he's making love to her. He's got to put makeup. You know, it goes back to Serena. Is it?
Director, right? He's a director, right?
Yeah,
So he's directing his lover.
right. It's a
Um,
control. Yeah,
you know,
you know.
and I think you know if you're a filmmaker of personal authorial cinema, which obviously Fellini is, you know, even someone like Spike Lee is, Scorsese is, and it's an author, whatever you're, whether it's you know Spike Lee's Inside Man or Mo Better Blues, a piece of you is going to be on screen. Um, I think you're always kind of putting your own issues one way or the other on
Yeah,
screen. And it's up to us to interpret, you know, what are you saying? That makes it personal. That makes it not assembly line. So I think, and 8.5 is meta in that it's a filmmaker, Fellini, who didn't know how to make his ninth movie,
right.
and it's about a filmmaker who doesn't know how to make his next movie. So I think it's definitely you know, the Venn diagram, the crossing of circles upon circles upon circles.
Yeah. No, that's a great. I had never thought of it that way, and you know, just looking at a character like Serena, even when the priests reprimand him, you know, hang the sign on his back and put whatever they put on his head, some big tall hat, or I
Yeah.
couldn't quite catch what that was.
Like a
Uh,
dunce cap,
what was it?
maybe like a dunce cap.
Yeah, something like that. And you know, it says Vergogna on his back. You
Shame.
know, for anyone who doesn't know, which means yeah, shameful. And you know, he obviously was rebellious because then he goes back to her. You know, you see him in that next scene. It's that he was obviously repressed and curious and go to the things that the church is saying is the devil that he was attracted to, you know. So those that guilt, those demons would carry on throughout the film. And I love that, you know, you see him on the elevator early on with a priest, and he just looks at them, and then every time he goes for advice, he goes to priests. It's such an interesting contradiction because at the same time these people can't help him. You know, they don't. You can't go talk. I mean, at least from what he shows about his sexual problems with women and with and his life with these priests, and they read something from the Bible. I love that one shot where you don't even see him, and it just goes back out the window, and then the window closes. That's so what a brilliant way to just say, "This isn't working out, Father." You know.
Well, that's such a resonant theme, I think, in a lot of Italian Catholic cinema. Mean Streets. Harvey
Yeah.
Keitel has his hand in the flame in the church. He needs to feel that pain and that amends for what he's naturally feeling. And I bring this point up in a lot of discussions that do or do not have anything to do with cinema. But all the Abrahamic traditions, whether it's Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, have so much to do with the notion of man's fall from grace, as if we're at war with nature, which of course means we're at war with our own natures. Whereas in the Far East, they tend to see it as as a natural landscape of which we and our natures are no less a part than everything else, even a tree. And so you don't need to be at odds with yourself.
Right.
I think Catholicism, not to defend it in that regard too much, but I think it kind of gets a bad rap in that it's really no different than any of the other Abrahamic traditions regarding that. What's different is the Catholic Church's temporal power over its domain. I don't know that there is a central Jewish state or Islamic state that literally is in charge of all the dictates of Judaism and Islam. But the Vatican, for God's sakes, the Vatican is its own nation state. It has been for over 1,000 years, and today is Vatican City. It's the smallest incarnation of that state. So and obviously the seat of the Catholic Church is Italy. So whether you're an Italian atheist or an Italian believer or an Italian agnostic, that relationship with the church and with spirituality is something that you really can avoid. And that's evident being Fellini in the 50s and 60s in Italy, or someone like Scorsese in for God's sakes, in Little Italy in New York. So it's very resonant. It's amazing how I turned out just fine as the son of Catholic clergy. I don't know what everyone's issue is, but
hey, I'm with you on that one. I was brought up a Catholic myself. That's really, really well said. There's a few things you had mentioned that I hadn't thought of before. What do you see as the most where was he using God, I don't know why the surrealism, where was he using that the most in this film? Do you think it was mainly in the fantasies in the past, or was it also a lot even in the present?
Well, in terms of surrealism, Fellini, I kind of see him as a very Jungian guy, meaning Carl Jung, the groundbreaking psychologist, in which everything has symbols. And even if you look, for instance, a lot of his extras in his movies, not to be mean or anything, but a lot of them are funny looking people. Not to get down on anybody, but he's using dwarves, he's using exceptionally tall people. So I think that it's kind of, whether it's the editing, the cross editing, particularly in that movie, where you see something happening in the now and it immediately cuts back, cross-referencing to something from his life,
right?
Or whether it's even in the now and you're looking literally at what's on screen, the extras he puts on screen, the way people look and move. I think that's how Fellini looked at life. And that was one of the things that really jumped out at me when I saw the movie. Why I say it changed my life is that it was one of the 3 movies or so that made me realize, wow, a motion picture can be like this. It doesn't have to be in the classical Hollywood tradition, a single protagonist who is overcoming one physical obstacle after another while there's a ticking clock, and you're basically watching a series of set pieces until he gets the MacGuffin.
Right.
So I think that in 8½, well, obviously more so in a lot of his other work up to that point, I think it's in the montage itself, the cutting itself, montage and editing, which probably is the single most intrinsic element in cinema that makes it cinema, as opposed to any other art form. So I think it's in all those things, all those aspects, particularly in 8.5.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, because again, this is a film that, every time you watch it, you see so much, whether it's psychologically or the surrealism, and stuff like that. But when I watched it last year for, I don't know, maybe, fifth or sixth time or something, and now watching it again the other night, I always thought the surrealism was really in the either the dreams or when he was looking back at his life. Like, like the past always had very dark shadows. They almost look like film noirish. The future was bright and white, and it was more with Claudia Cardinale was more angelic and dreamlike. And when I watched it again, I almost thought, how did I miss how much he was also doing that in the present? Like, as you said, when he's under the table towards the end of the film, when all the critics are there and he has to say something to the press, and you hear the gunshot, and immediately it just goes to everyone being gone, that he quit. He makes you think for that second that maybe he took out a gun and shot himself, but no, it's just that's just how he was feeling, what he wanted to do. It's that nightmare, that dreamlike aspect, and or even in the cutting room when they're all watching the screen tests, and then suddenly there's a guy hanging himself as he looks to his left, and it's just unbelievable that he went that far with this film. And I can't think of many directors who, maybe other than like Lynch nowadays, who do that. I'm sure there are more. I'm just not coming to mind. But
Charlie Kaufman.
Yeah, Charlie Kaufman. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that well, first of all, any great movie should have more and more to offer every time.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think Fellini is one of a lot of directors, not just from Italy at that time, but since we're specifically talking about Italy, that were successful, I think, because also not just what they produced themselves, but the times they lived in that were more amenable to accepting those type of things. If you brought up David Lynch, I remember, for instance, going to a screening of Mulholland Drive, and or even Terrence Malick. I went to a screening of
Tree of Life, and
apparently in both of those screenings, apparently it was the first time any of the audience saw a David Lynch or Terrence Malick film. They just roaming out. I don't know what the hell this is supposed to mean. I want my money back.
Yeah.
And Kubrick dealt with that when 2001 came out.
Yeah.
But I think that audiences, and this pertains, I think, a lot to a larger question we had, which is about do Italian films still hold up? I think that audiences have changed a great deal. Roger Ebert would talk about how in the 60s, when he was in college and a fledgling critic as well, students lined up in the rain to see the new Antonioni film, to see the new Fellini film, the new Kurosawa film, the new Godard film, the new Buñuel film. I just mentioned half a dozen different cultures and ethnicities.
Yeah.
And they each offered something, different in terms of style. And today, that's just not the case.